This is the Make Everyday Your Day podcast, the show that delves into the world of health, fitness, love, and balance to help you transform into your greatest self and create many more magical moments in your life. Let's play. My name is Swadhyaya Yoga, and I'll be your host today on this beautiful, magnificent day. Welcome to Throwback Thursday, where we get an opportunity to talk to one of the veterans of the game, people who've been playing for a while, and they can share their insight, share what they're up to, share how they've utilized the tools of the game to impact your life and transform others. Today, I have a very amazing guest. Her name is Yogini Mimi. Yogini Mimi is an internationally recognized yoga instructor. Having spent the last 2 years in India, Yogini Mimi has coached and transformed over hundreds of yoga instructors in the school of Swadhyaya Yoga. She is a long-term player of the game. She is an amazing mother, and she's also my older sister. To learn more about who she is, you can go to her website at www.yoginimimi.com. And that's YOGIN as in nickel, IMIMI.com. According to the Your Day Balance Game, Mimi is a beginner lifestyle player and intermediate level in fitness. Let's get rocking and rolling. Mimi, how are you being today, love?
I am being extraordinary. Thank you for asking. And thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
It is my pleasure. My pleasure. So let's delve into it. You've been going around the world doing amazing things, really following your passion, following your dreams, which is amazing. You know, I love it when people follow their passion and dreams. However, let's get into the backstory. I love the backstory about how you got here. Now, you and I have been hanging out for a few years, you know, since you are my older sister, and you've gone through many different careers and rocked them out. And you kind of had like a transformative life awakening a few years back. Tell us about your story about what you were doing before you became this amazing yoga instructor of instructors and what caused that shift.
Well, thank you for asking. It really is something of a interesting journey. A few years back, I was a district sales manager for a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. And I was, air quotes, happily going along my life, working as a district sales manager, but I wasn't really truly happy. I had just put on the face of happiness, but inside I was breaking down. To be quite honest, I was breaking down. My organs had stopped working optimally, and I found myself on a cutting table, having a very important part of me cut out because it wasn't operating optimally. And I be frank, I had a hysterectomy, and that hysterectomy, when they cut out the uterus, they left the ovaries behind. But I found myself having an awakening and questioning whether or not I was still whole, because I no longer was able to give life. So questioning what is being a female and how am I showing up in the world. The work I was doing was challenging me to be much more tapping into my masculine side. It was very aggressive, very competitive, and it was about delivering the numbers. And I had sales reps that were reporting to me for a large part of the country. And a lot of the aggressive part of me, I think, might have influenced the growth of the tumors that required me to have the surgery. But I kept putting my health on the back burner so that I can continue to deliver the numbers, because it's a very competitive field and I wanted to win. And for me, I was willing to make that sacrifice. Until one day, a few weeks after the surgery, my doctor called me and said, "Hey, we biopsied the tumors on your uterus and the tests have come back inconclusive. We need you to come back in for some more lab work." And it was then that it wasn't when they had me on the table cutting out my organs that I had the wake up call that this was not the job for me. It was when they called me back and said, "Hey, you might have something else wrong with you. Come back in." And all the way up until this point, I already knew what it was going to take for me to get healthy. And I knew that physically I was not healthy. Mentally, I was not healthy. Spiritually, I was not healthy. And socially, I was not healthy. Physically, I had gotten up to 180 pounds. I had edema in my ankles. Every time I flew, and I flew a lot, my ankles would swell. And mentally, I only thought about work. I wasn't thinking about anything else. I wasn't thinking about socially having any friends or relating to my son in a powerful way. It was all work driven. And work, I was not the priority for the job. I was just a number. So it was a very interesting experience, and road traveled was what ultimately led me to that call. Was what ultimately led me to reassess my priorities and walk away from that, almost literally walk away from that. And it was from walking away, the choice to walk away from the pharmaceutical sales industry, that I found myself on the path of yoga. So I literally quit my job on August 28th and then got on an airplane to Spain to walk the Camino de Compostela de Santiago, which is a 500-mile, 800-kilometer walk. And I walked the whole way, and it took me 28 days. But it was very cathartic. It was a whole release for me, very spiritual. And I planned out my 3 months to be in Spanish-speaking countries. So after Spain, I went to Costa Rica. So it was like a land, water, air experience. And the land was walking across the Compostela. The water was surfing for 30 days on the east coast of Costa Rica. And the air was embracing my spirituality through yoga. And that was a 30-day yoga teacher training course in Costa Rica. So that's how I found myself firmly rooted on the path.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's back up even further than that. You started taking your game day years before that, playing this game, and you'd come in and check up on me here in Atlanta, Georgia, and just entertain me and kind of see where you're at by taking your game day. And we always had that feedback. And year after year, I'd said, okay, here's where you're at, here's where you're at. And you're like a beginner 50, 60 range. And that's pretty much where you stayed for quite a few years. Tell us about that process of how you took your game day and how many years you took that, and some of the feedback and conversations you would have leading up to you making that choice after being on the table and getting cut.
So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say I started playing the game around 2005. I feel like that sounds like about the right time. And at the time I was living in California, and I had my son and the guy I was dating when I first started coming to take the game day. And I was working in pharmaceutical sales or trying to figure myself out. I was doing some acting as well. And I would come back and visit you once a year around Thanksgiving, usually. And you would say, "Hey, let's get in the playground and take your game day." And I'd be like, "Okay," I'd strap on my shoes. And mostly I felt like I was doing it to support you, but I like how you couch it as humoring you. That's probably more closer to the truth. I got to support my little brother. This is what I was thinking. So I wasn't really taking it all that serious until I was on the treadmill doing the walk and realizing, man, I cannot do this walk. And I go through all these emotional releases and then just like put it aside for another 11 months and then come back on that 12th month and do it again and be like reminded of how poorly I was doing on the walk on the treadmill. So that pretty much became the modus operandi for 2005, 2006, 2007, all the way until about 2013. And it was in 2013, I would say 2012, when I had made the decision, because I made the decision to go on the cutting table. And that happened on Christmas 2012. And I remember calling you up and letting you know what I was going through, and you saying something to the effect, when you're complete with that experience, let me know. Something like that. I don't remember if those were your exact words, because we had about a 2-hour conversation about what I was getting ready to go through. There was a lot of fear in me. You know, I had never gone through that kind of surgery before. And I remember telling you, okay, I'll swing by Atlanta and figure things out as I go. But I didn't. So that year I was in Seattle and I went under the knife. They cut out my organ and I did not follow up on that offer to check you out. I went back to work because while I was recovering, I got a phone call and they said, your job is in jeopardy in essence. If you want to keep it, you need to fly from Seattle to Texas, Dallas, Texas, and interview for your position. And mind you, I was probably 2 weeks into the recovery process, and it's a 8-week recovery process from the sutures being wet. So I called my doctor and I said, hey, doc, can I get clearance to fly? And I have an interview, a job interview. I absolutely need this job. And the doctor replied, absolutely not. And I hung up the phone and I booked my ticket and I flew for the interview anyway. Interestingly enough, it doesn't stop there. I competed for the job. I did what it takes. I didn't complain or tell anybody what I was going through. I was partway through disability, and that in and of itself is unethical for the company to have me do that. And then a week later or so, I was contacted by my company and they said, congratulations, you got the job. Now, mind you, when I did the interview, they asked me, where would you like to be placed? And because I was going through the recovery process, I noticed that some of the places that were optional or that were options were close to family members. So Atlanta was an option. Nearby Little Rock was an option, and nearby New Mexico was an option. And I have family members in all those places. And so I put those on my list of preferences. So they said, congratulations, you got the job. You're going to Maryland. Maryland? I don't know anybody in Maryland. So that's what they did. That was what company loyalty gets you. So I ended up in Maryland. And then to further compound the insult, they told me, we need you to pack your bags and move your household by next month. The next month would have been February. And I have a teenager who's in high school in his last semester. And they wanted me to uproot him and move him across country. I said, hell no. At least let him finish out the school year and I'll relocate by May when school is done. And they said, okay, we can negotiate with you. It will require you flying bi-coastal from Seattle to Maryland, managing the territory, managing the sales reps in Maryland. Now, keep in mind, I had not gone through the full physical recovery of the surgery, let alone the mental recovery. But I said yes. I did it anyway. Here I am thinking I'm being a great employee, and employee reviews come up and they changed all the parameters that they were looking at reviewing all the employees. So I'm busting my balls, proverbial balls, working my ass off. And they sit me down at my employee interview, my annual review, and they say, you are underperforming. For all intents and purposes, I had met all of the requirements that they had asked me to do. They said, we need somebody in this territory to fill the 3 vacancies that have been existing in this territory for the last 2 years. And I did it. But when they reviewed me, they said, subpar performance. And it was at that point that I said, okay, that's enough. Because what they were pretty much trying to do was give them, the company, a reason for why I was not the employee for that position. I didn't need any other reasons. But I still tried. I had started getting dissuaded and I kept on working hard. But I realized I needed a break. I needed to recover. And I went to my boss and I said, hey, I need 30 days sabbatical. And they said, no. I said, okay, I quit. And that was it. And that's when I finally came to you. It wouldn't have been until June or July that I actually came to you and said, hey, Day, I'm ready to quit my job. And that's when I wrote the completion letter that said, okay, I've had enough. So it wasn't when I got the surgery. It was like 8 months later, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, 7 months later.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's amazing how you see that happen with many people that's so committed to their path, their career, making well, taking care of their family, that it takes so many things to knock on the door before they actually make that shift. So I get it. And I believe there's somebody on this on this podcast right now listening who's doing the same thing, justifying all the reasons why they should stay in a dead end job, literally, because that's where they're going to end up. And it's just, everything's knocking on the door. Life's knocking on the door. Health's knocking on the door, and they're not listening. They keep ignoring the door knock. So yeah, it sounds like you listened finally, and you said, all right, I'm done. You wrote that completion letter, and we sat down in Atlanta, and you talked about what you planned on doing. At that point, I remember you told me, I'm going to walk across Spain just to walk this energy off, get myself centered, find out who Mimi is. And then from there, I'm going to take yoga. I'm going to be yoga certified in Costa Rica and surf for a month. And then after that, I'll come back and just hang around the game for a couple of years and just learn it and understand it and see if it can help transform me further from what I'm already going to do. So tell us a little bit more about that, your time frame here, and how it impacted you, some of the tools of the game.
I went to Spain. I did the walk. I had so many revelations, and I did the surf, and I experienced the freedom of surfing. And then I did the yoga teacher training course, and I had the transformational experience. And I knew from the yoga teacher training course that this was something I wanted to do. This was something I wanted to live. I wanted to fully embrace the yogic lifestyle. And I admired how closely the game embodied so many of these 6,000-year-old traditional lifestyle tenets. And so I came back, I relocated my household from Maryland, put it all in storage in Atlanta with your support and the community support. And then I just started immersing myself in the game.
Before you go further, tell us a highlight from each one of those stages. I mean, because that's profound, walking 500-600 miles in Spain. So tell us a highlight from that. I want to hear a highlight about surfing in Costa Rica for a month, because somebody's listening right now and they're going to do the same thing. Tell us one of the biggest takeaways. And then tell us one of the biggest takeaways from that yoga for another month. So I want to hear something, whatever moves your spirit, a highlight from each one of those 3 big transitional moments in your life.
Thanks for asking that, because I didn't tell you how I was inspired to go on the walk. I was convalescing in my bed, and I was hopped up on all these pain medications, just high and low, because spiritually and emotionally I was depressed. And I decided to binge watch something on Netflix. I picked up my iPad and I scrolled through, and I saw this movie, and it was called The Way, and it starred Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez, father and son. And it was about the son who dies on the Camino during some kind of torrential downpour or something, and they retrieve his backpack and find the father's information. And the father and son are disenfranchised. So all these meds that I had in my body had me crying through the whole movie. And I made a vow to God, and I said, if I ever have 30 days, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go do the walk. And then, cue the call from my boss saying the territory is being realigned. You're at risk for losing your job. So all of that led to me saying, okay, fine, I'll work. But finally in July, my 40th birthday was coming up. And I thought to myself, how can I honor myself in a way that says, yes, I feel loved. And I told myself, I can go learn yoga. I can go surf. I can go honor my vow that I made to God if I had 30 days to go do the walk. But it wasn't until they said, no, they will not support me in having a 30-day sabbatical, because I was going through a list of things and trying to choose one or the other to honor myself. Until they said no, I said, okay, I'll do all 3. So I quit the job, created more than 30 days of space, and I did all 3. So when I went on the Camino, I read all these books, and they were talking about all the different things that people try to find in themselves, like some kind of great awakening or some epiphany, because it's supposed to be a very spiritual walk. It's the walk of Saint James, which was one of Jesus Christ's disciples. And so many of the people who went on the walk came back having the realization that there was no epiphany. There was just you and blisters on your feet, and that was it. Like painful knees, I came back with plantar fasciitis. I was like, it wasn't so great. But I did have a major epiphany, and that was walk more. That was it. Walk more. So I decided, okay, I'll walk more. That was my download. So that was my major epiphany from the walk.
I'd like to put a disclaimer in there that you didn't really work out or exercise before that walk. You just said, I'm going to go do it. So you went straight from pharmaceutical selling, driving around all day long, pharmaceutical, working hard, to 600-mile walk. So as a disclaimer, most people don't do that. Some people actually practice before they get out there. So you might not get plantar fasciitis on this walk.
That is so true. I went from a very sedentary lifestyle and I just decided, okay, let me just walk. And then I got to the walk and there were all these people who were asking questions like, so how many months did you prepare for this walk? And I was like, prepare? What do you mean prepare? They're like, well, I've been walking 5 miles a day for the last 3 months. And I was like, I haven't been doing any of that. So yeah, you might not get plantar fasciitis if you prepare. So then I went surfing and the cool command of the waves and the control of one's body that one needs to master the waves. In Costa Rica, they call it correando las olas, running the waves. And to see how those surfers so masterfully commanded the surfboard, when I got out there, the sea kicked my ass. It slapped me face down, kicked my little butt and said, get out of here. So I learned a healthy respect for the ocean. That was you just don't fuck around with the ocean. Is that all right if I said that? It was a beautiful, butt-wrenching, because you get caught in these washing machines and you just get tumbled around, and the surfboard, if you're not aware of your direction, you get disoriented and the surfboard lands on your head. And I'm looking at these surfers and I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it. You know, I took a couple of lessons and I got out there and I took a couple of rough waves, really beautiful waves, and I just got my ass handed to me. And it was such a beautiful experience. And that was my epiphany from the ocean. I had a healthy respect for the ocean ever since. Mother Ocean. Gratitude. And then for yoga, when I took the yoga teacher training course, I had been practicing some version of yoga for a long time because our mom taught us sun salutations from a very early age. And I thought, I know yoga. I've got this. I would dabble with Bikram yoga and dabble with some other forms of yoga along the way, over the last 25 years. But when I took that yoga teacher training course, it was such a deep immersion into the self that it wasn't until I was there really embracing the path, I realized how I had neglected spirit. I had neglected self, and I did not know what self-love was until I sat in that space getting to know myself. And I realized I had not been loving myself all these years. So that was my epiphany from the yoga teacher training course, was loving myself, learning to love myself, and learning what love is and what it isn't.
Powerful, very powerful. I love the way it boils back down to love. Let's follow that path. Tell me about the correlation between when you came back here and you started learning more about the Your Day philosophy and all the great things you learned in yoga. Tell me about how the two tied together and how it's evolved into who you are now as an internationally renowned yoga instructor.
With the Your Day philosophy, we have 7 awakenings of the game. And among the 7 awakenings, we have the 5 foundational principles. And those 5 foundational principles tie so mellifluously into the yogic practice. I mean, every single one of the awakenings has a very deep connection to the yogic practice that cannot be disavowed. But a lot of the tenets really speak to who you're being. And that's what yoga is about, is who you're being. We've gotten so caught up in this world of doing, and we got to be doing this and we got to be doing that. And it seems like we become human doing or human doers, when in essence, we are first and foremost human beings. So how are we being? And a lot of us are not being anymore. We're just doing. And it's mindless. There's passive eating, and then there's intentional eating, for example. There's passive talking, and then there's intentional talking. There's passive sleeping, which is what I was doing. I would exhaust myself at work, come home, and go comatose. And then there's intentional sleeping, where you can actually start accessing downloads during your sleep to help manifest and create in your life. There's passive sex, and then there's intentional sex. All these things, the difference between being passive about life and being on automatic control and then being intentional about life is the essence of both of these practices that I was able to start taking away from it and living in a more intentional way. So when we get to the 5 foundational principles, one of the foundational principles is everything is energy. Everything is energy. From the thoughts you hold, to the things that you do, to the cement cinder blocks that form the walls around you in your home, to the trees, to the people, to the words. Everything is energy. The thoughts you hold. And it's in Stephen Covey's book. I forget who he quoted it from. It might have been Frankel. But he says, you sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. And so the thoughts that we hold are so intimately intertwined in who you become in the life that you live. And one of the things that you said to me is, you think who you are today and all the experiences that you're having today are just some random happenstance? Who you are today happened 5 years ago from a decision you made 5 years ago that culminated into who you are being today. And that's what yoga teaches us. It teaches us the mindfulness of the choices that we make now ripple forward into who we are being. And we have these, who we are being is called our latent impressions. And if we continue on the certain path of being in a reactionary mode, which is another concept in the Your Day Balance game, if you stay in a reactionary mode, then you continue to amplify your misery. And this is a yogic philosophy. And you amplify this misery until you die. But those latent impressions that you've created from who you are being don't stop when you're dead. They continue to follow you at the next birth. So who I am today isn't just a person who I was 5 years ago. And this is their epiphany. It was a person who I was before I even was born. And it's just been that energy that has been following through until I started becoming intentional, actively choosing, and more powerfully saying, yes, no, yes, no. Does this align with spirit? Does this misalign with spirit? And so this is part of the work. And this is the essence of both, for me, the Your Day Balance game and the yogic path. And there's such a great synchrony between not just the 5 foundational principles, but the 1 billion watchers, the number 1 awakening, which talks about watch. Watch being an acronym where your self-awareness, independent will, thought and conscience, and your habits. All these things come straight out of the work that we do with the frontal cortex in yoga, because activation of the frontal cortex is a prerequisite to our yogic practice. And ultimately, we're working towards samadhi or bliss. And in the game, we're working towards the higher levels of calibration on the power versus force scale. And as you get higher and higher, you get to enlightenment. But below that is peace and joy and love. And these form part of my mission statement. Another tool of the balance game.
Exciting. So you stayed around this program for about 3 years, and I really appreciate the time and investment that you delved into and grew and just blessed us with so much of your gifts as well. And then it took you all the way to India. All of a sudden, Spirit says, time to go. I'm moving on to India. Tell us about that journey. Tell us about all the great things you did there and how you're prepared to bring it back here in a way that the world hasn't seen yet, or I would say at least America has not seen yet.
So interestingly enough, it was when I was in Costa Rica that I had the awakening that on the 28th day of a 28-day yoga teacher training program, mind you, why am I here in South America getting this yoga teacher training? I need to go to the source. So I had 28 days of immersion in this information. I was like, oh, I need to go to India. And that was in 2013. I didn't go to India until 2016 because I really wanted to get the experience of teaching yoga and making it a part of my life. And if it was not for the Your Day Balance Game community, I would not have been able to dedicate 100% of my intention and awareness solely into my yogic practice. If I did not have the Your Day Balance Game community to support me, I would have had to take a day job because I see it all the time. I see yoginis go to the yoga teacher training program, come back, and then they can't afford to just teach yoga. And they're doing 12 hours a week or 14 hours a week and scrambling all around town, trying to attract clients and just exhausting themselves and still having to hold a day job. And this division of the energy both into the healthy and into the gotta make a dime, gotta make a living, rat race kind of mentality is in conflict. And these yoginis are in conflict. And their ability to fully immerse and be what they have learned as the truth of our human existence is at odds. And so there's these conflicting yoginis, on the one hand, they're like, I'm a yoga practitioner, I'm Zen, I am centered, I'm all about balance. On the other hand, they're like, I need my coffee. Forgive me, I know. And they're judging themselves. They need their coffee to lift them up because they're so exhausted and tired. And then at the end of the day, they've gone through stressing themselves out. They're like, oh my God, give me a glass of wine because they're so exhausted. They need to just unwind from the stress of the day. And it's all in conflict with what the essence of yoga is. The essence of yoga is balance and cleansing and detoxing. And that's a regular way of being. And coffee is the opposite of cleansing. And wine is the opposite of detoxing. And you're just ingesting all these toxins so that you can pick yourself up and so you can put yourself down. So for me, having the community be able to support me in my yogic practice, in my yoga teaching, was so critical to me being able to sustain myself. And so for the next 3 years, I sustained myself solely on my yoga teaching. And I look back on that and I was like, that in and of itself is magic. The ability to influence self, others, and life. And I co-created that with the Your Day Balance Game. But I was not able to ever get beyond a certain point in my own mentality because each time the students came in, they were back at square one. I did not see them advancing. So in my own mentality, I was like feeling a little bit withdrawing within myself. Like, what can I do to get them to get to another place in their yoga practice? The reason why they weren't advancing was because they were coming to see me 1 hour once a week. And there's not going to be the same kind of advancement. If anything, there's going to be a plateau and a steady state that was reached. So at some point I was like, I need to evolve myself in order to understand how to help my students get past their blockages. It's time for me to go to India and learn what else I don't know. So I went to India and I had intended to go for a 42-day training in Rishikesh Yoga Peeth. And Swadhyaya Yoga School, by the way, is an affiliate yoga school with Rishikesh Yoga Peeth. And that's in Uttarakhand in the northeast region of India. And I got to day 37 and I could not go. I was like, my flight is coming up and I'm not ready to leave yet. It felt like I had just planted a seed. And my guru had just begun to water it to the point where it was just starting to crack out of the seed. The roots were just starting to sprout. And it was time to go. And I just couldn't do that. I'd have to transport this seedling from the soil of the enriching soil of the spirituality of Rishikesh back into Atlanta. And I was like, what are my options? I'm not ready to go. So to my family's dismay, I called them up 3 days before I was supposed to return. And I said, I'm not coming home. I'm staying. Nobody was very pleased with that decision, except me. I was so grateful that I made that choice, because had I not made that choice, I do not think I would have cultivated and honed and created the self that is a teacher of teachers in yoga now. And that experience was profound in and of itself. There were revelations and eye-openings along the journey that were just magical. It was 100% magical. And it has kept me coming back to Rishikesh year after year up until this point.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I wasn't pleased that you didn't come back, but that's a different story. However, I am excited that you followed your passion. I mean, that's always a great thing. So talk to me about all the great things you've done there. Not a whole lot, just to recap it, but I believe you've trained many, many yoga instructors around the world now. Talk to me about that, and talk to me about what this has awakened as far as your vision for your yoga practice or your yoga curriculum, I would say.
So when I went to my guru on the 38th day and said, I'm not ready to return to the U.S. Can I stay? He said, sure. And I listed a long list of qualifications and capabilities. And he looked at me and he said, those are not important. He said, just go with the flow. And I was like, but I can do this and I can do that. And that was my type A personality coming through, showing how I could help with the website development. I could help with teaching the staff English and all these other capabilities that I could contribute. He said, no, you won't be teaching anything. Just stay and observe yourself and just stay for a few weeks and see if this is where you truly want to be. So that's how he approached it. And so I was like, okay. Maybe I could teach the 200 hour. He said, just be. And so for the next 3-4 days, I just was and meditated and journaled, wondering how I could apply my skill sets towards 200 hours. So I started meditating upon some of the things I could do if I was asked to teach the 200 hour. And I was prepared mentally to teach the 200 hour because I had just earned my 300 hour certification. So I could teach something beneath a little bit lower than where I had just learned, I thought. So I was expecting to just stay for like 2 weeks, but about day 8 of after I completed my certification training, my guru comes to me, and he had become more and more disenfranchised with the whole Yoga Alliance standards dictating what yoga is, because yoga is more than just what they were saying is check the box. It's a lifestyle. And so he had started putting his eyes towards the vision that he was creating, and his heart was there now too, which was an ashram up in the Himalayan mountains called Abhyaranya, a yoga village. So I knew that there would be an opportunity because he taught philosophy and interwove anatomy and physiology into the philosophy so intricately that you couldn't tell where one began and the other ended, and it all made sense, glowing, radiant sense. And he came to me on the 8th day and he said, you're teaching the 300-hour anatomy and physiology class. And my jaw dropped because I was like, I can't do that. I just came out of the 300-hour class. I'm not prepared to teach the level at where I am. I'm prepared to teach the level where I came from, below that, like 200-hour. And he said, you're teaching the 300-hour anatomy and physiology class. And I immediately went into panic mode because the way he did it was so glowing. And I was like, I don't know that I could do it service. And it almost comes back to, do you remember that time when I came back from Costa Rica and I was teaching a yoga class and I was like, come into a comfortable seated position on your mats. And you came to me at the end of the class and you said, Mimi, that's not your voice. I was like, you're right. It's my teacher's voice from Costa Rica. And you said, just use your own voice, Mimi. And I said, okay, I'll try. Similar thing happened with that. I was trying to channel my guru in the anatomy and physiology lessons that I was teaching. And I was afraid that I couldn't do that effectively because he interwove philosophy, yoga philosophy, so articulately, so passionately, so beautifully in the anatomy and physiology. And so for the first couple of courses, I just stumbled over myself trying to do what he did. But then eventually I found my voice and I found how to articulate the anatomy and physiology. And it resonated with the students so much that the first class went through and the students started saying really great things to the management team. And the management team pulled me aside and said, hey, Mimi, we didn't get not one complaint from your class. And I was like, well, did you get any great feedback? And they said, Mimi, that's not the point. Out of 30 students, nobody complained. There's always somebody complaining, but nobody complained. I was like, okay, so it's not good feedback that you're looking at. It's no complaints. So it was a new paradigm for me. But they saw that as a win, and they were like, this is a great teacher, because nobody complained. And when we're talking nobody, we're talking people from all over the world come to Rishikesh to learn yoga. You have China, Vietnam, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, New Zealand, Ecuador, Argentina, Venezuelan, German, French, Americans, Canadians, Mexicans. You have people from all over the world. It's Koreans sitting in these classes. So to have no complaints from a global class, they were like, okay, you can stay on. So it was like, that was my test. That was my throwing me in the deep end and seeing if I could swim, sink or swim kind of moment.
Wow, that is a great story. Tell us how, let's fast forward real quick, because we're going to wrap this up this time. There'll be many more to talk about. Tell us how this has birthed your new vision for yourself, because I know you did that for 2 years and it can be a long, deep, profound conversation. But for the sake of this podcast, tell us how this has birthed your new vision.
I ended up teaching over 600 students over the last 2 years and leading and developing curriculum for around 28 yoga teacher training courses. Somewhere in the whole process, a year and a half ago, I went to my teacher and I shared with him a vision I had for opening up a retreat center. It would be called Swadhyaya Yoga Retreats. And it would be 7-day courses around the world because I like to travel. And what I'm doing is combining my love of teaching with my love of travel when I do this. And he held my hand and he said, if you do yoga teacher training courses, I will support you. And I was inspired. I said, I hadn't even thought about opening up school. And he said, think about it. I meditated on it and it came to me. Yes. The answer was yes, I'll do this, especially to have the support of my guru. And he's such a great person. He has supported a school in Italy. He supported a school in France. And now he supported Swadhyaya. And my first yoga teacher training course under my school affiliated with Rishikesh Yogpith was in Indonesia, November 2017, just last year. And for the first time since I've been teaching yoga teachers, I led my first yoga teacher training course in the United States underneath my school. So that was a huge eye-opening, opportunity expanding realization for me. And that's the path that I'm on now, is continuing to bring the authentic traditional Hatha Vinyasa yoga to wherever I am with yoga teacher training courses.
Wow, that's exciting. And all this happened, I guess, the last couple of weeks. You just completed, I believe, a 200-hour course and 2 200-hour courses and a 300-hour course and an immersion course. I'm sure you can tell us. Nevertheless, how can they get in touch? Because right now there's somebody listening and saying, listen, I am going to train under her. They already know it. They knew it when you first started talking, and they waited this whole podcast just to get your information. So tell them what's coming up, tell them where they can get in touch with you, and then let's wrap it up.
You can go to my website, www.yoginimimi.com. That's YOGIN like Nancy, I, M like Mary, I, M like Mary, I.com. Or connect with me on Facebook at Mimi Adeogba, Adeogba, A Alpha, D Delta, E Echo, O Oscar, G Golf, B Bravo, A Alpha. Or you can check me out on Instagram, Yogini_Mimi, same spelling as the website, Yogini_Mimi. And you can connect with me in all these venues, and I can, through those venues, give you my direct email address. So we have an upcoming course, a 200-hour yoga teacher training course in Bali, and that's in November 5th through the 29th. And then we also have 200-hour teacher training courses in September and in October. So you can connect with me and get on the list for those courses and sign up.
Yes, and yes. What I love about Mimi too is that she was in the Your Day philosophy and still is. Been in it for 3, now 5 years plus. And she integrates the two. So when you go through a course, you'll still be getting a lot about this philosophy, and she'll still take you through different pieces of the game, and it's just fascinating how she's really transformed this into yoga. And I love to see that with coaches. So I'm blessed and I'm very grateful for that as well. I'm gonna wrap up there. Mimi, is there anything else you'd like to leave your guests, your new fans, or your new possible coaches before we wrap up?
Two things. The first one is the September course and the October course are going on in Atlanta. And the second thing is a quote from Gandhi, who I respect very highly. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Beautiful, Mimi. Well said. I love you so much, and thank you for just being an amazing person in my life and always being there. By the time I came out, always there. I love you. I love you all on this podcast as well. My name is Saint Day Adeogba, and remember, make every day your day.
Upside down, now break and move. Do the lottie, now squat and hop. Do the lottie, to the front, to the back, drop it low.
Hello, players. A quick note about the Make Everyday Your Day podcast. I'm not giving medical advice. My thoughts, opinions, and beliefs are my own. Please consult with your doctor or healthcare provider regarding any questions or issues you have related to your personal, physical, or mental health.